Welcome to the Grassroots Army podcast. This platform is for common sense people looking for up-to-date, accurate, and truthful information without the hot garbage corporate media bias. The power of one can lead to the power of many. You never know what small act that you may say or do that may literally change the lives of millions tomorrow. And don't you ever think that you can't make a difference, because you can. Good morning, my fellow Michiganders. Good morning, my fellow Americans. Welcome to the Grassroots Army podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Garrett Soldano, and I have a great guest on the show here today, Mr. Aric Nesbitt, and we're just going to go through the unbelievable dumpster fire that our country is in, especially in the state of Michigan with everything that's going on. So he decided to come in and give us some insight of exactly what's going on in the state of Michigan, especially with obviously Goshen, the reading scores at a 10-year low. I mean, unfortunately, Governor Whitmer, along with Kamala Harris, is just a gift that keeps on giving. So welcome to the show, Aric.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Garrett. Appreciate all you do for the state of Michigan and really bringing truth to the masses and making sure that we're talking to voters and citizens and families around the state. And just thank you for staying with it. I mean, it's been 4.5 years that you've been fighting the good fight, putting the individual over the state and really taking a good lead on common sense leadership. And that's something where I've really appreciated what you've done over the last 4.5 years.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that. And I think you hit the nail on the head, as a lot of people are just looking for, the truth. They don't want a narrative. They don't want a political narrative. Just give us a truth and we're going to figure it out as Americans, right? And that is one thing that I think a lot of us, that have been awakened for the last 4.5 years, is we're just sick and tired of the lies. And it just seems like the Democrats, they tell a lie, they keep telling a lie, and then the corporate media run with that lie. And then all their social media minions gush over that lie until they get called out, and then people realize it's a lie, and then they just switch. It's like wash, rinse, and repeat, and it's frustrating to watch. And so I think a lot of people now are just looking for areas where they're like, hey, just give me the truth. So I'm so excited that you came on the show today, because obviously Michigan is just it's a hot mess right now. And you said something before we went live today that just really stuck into my mind, is like California, my Michigan.
Yeah, that's it's unfortunate that Governor Whitmer's active run for president over the last 1.5 years. And again, that she was trying to go as far left as possible. And she was following, California is kind of the big model for these left-wing Democrats. But Minnesota finally lost the Republican Senate when we lost our Republican Senate in Michigan. And Governor Walz has just gone full bore, even further than Governor Whitmer's gone in progressive policies, but they have larger Democrat majorities in Minnesota. And so that's who she's been keeping up with, are these other left-wing states. You're talking a phase out of fossil fuels over the next 15 years. You're talking controlling businesses around the state in terms of what ratios employees need to have, lawsuits, just opening up small businesses for lawsuits left and right. And let's remember, when you first got involved 4.5 years ago, what did Facebook do to you? What did Meta do to you, right? Shut you down. Yep. And it reminds me in 2018 when I announced for the state Senate, and it was always a little chirping here and there on social media. This is supposed to be the new age where you can talk directly to folks and families that uncensored, not having to go through the national news media. But my announcement in spring of 2018 when I was running for Senate, Facebook blocked that. Now they actually deplatformed you. They took you off.
Yeah, that's what's so frustrating now, that old Zuckerberg, and I posted on this last couple of days, he's coming out and basically apologizing for all the censorship and stuff. I'm like, hey, the damage has already been done, and that's where a lot of us, we get called out. We're called conspiracy theorists, but everything that we are standing up for against the unconstitutional lockdowns, about the mandates, the list goes on and on and on. We've been proven the therapeutics that work, that they try to cover up. That's the insanity. And it just seems like there's no accountability with these social media companies, because they're privately owned businesses. So I understand that we don't want government involved, regulating, because I'm against overregulation, right? But it's just like, where does it stop? Because when they're so powerful and they basically have a monopoly and they can control a narrative, I mean, obviously it's been proven that they can influence or even help sway the election. So what do we do?
Yeah, I mean, I look at my announcement in 18, and I mean, I just talked about how I was a common sense conservative, that it was a pro First Amendment, pro Second Amendment, fighting for common sense conservative ideas, our free market economics, ending sanctuary cities, and reforming auto insurance. I was pro veteran. I think I had, maybe that was what struck them, but it's something where it's really concerning going into another election this year. And you saw it 4 years ago on how it can influence the votes. But I think what you're doing in terms of broadcasting and saying, okay, we're going to go straight to folks and different platforms. And that's what you've done. And there is a market-based economics to it of saying, you know, how can you actually talk without censorship around around the country, around the world. And you see that with, I think, Elon Musk with the purchase of X. I mean, Twitter was getting really bad. I mean, they took out, I think, 2,500 of my followers a few years ago before, Musk bought it, because they were, I think they were deplatforming some folks that they didn't like what they were saying. Right.
You're exactly right. And you're right about like the evolution of politics and media in general. It seems like more and more people are not watching the commercials, and you're involved in politics, obviously, and my run for governor.
This is nothing new. I mean, you look at it in the mid-40s, 1940s, after World War II, Richard Nixon was out there as a member of Congress in the House Un-Americans Activity Committee saying that there are spies, Soviet spies in the American government. In the media, the national media says, no, there are none. And that was nearly 80 years ago. And so this is it. And it came to find out that there were Soviet spies in the American government.
So with that being said, do you think with the evolution of politics right now with media, do you think less is going to be spent on like lining the pocketbooks of the corporate media and more is going to be spent on social media with advertising, with commercials? Because how many times do we really watch a commercial these days? I know, as soon as a commercial comes on, even if I watch a commercial, I look at my phone, right? So before we didn't have our phones and we would watch the commercials, and you still see, I mean, the millions and millions of dollars that we spent on corporate media. I mean, just looking at my gubernatorial candidate, our campaign, I mean, we were spending, over $1 million for a 30-second ad that was not even statewide. It's frustrating. It's ridiculous. Do you think it's going to evolve into just social media?
I think it's, unfortunately, it's just going to get more and more expensive, because you got to cover all the eyeballs and the number of folks that are getting their news and information. There's still folks that get it from traditional broadcast media. There's folks that get it through social media and alternative media. There's folks that still get off from radio, podcasts. And so now it's more divergent in that, and you have to start earlier too with this 45 days of early voting, absentee voting. Before, it was really the last 10 days where you had to work hard for the advertising. And so unfortunately, instead of with the way voting is happening now, and then the way people are getting their news from more divergent sources, that unfortunately there's two factors. One is, where do you find the folks that actually see the information? And so you see that with live news still, Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, and live sports. And live sports are expensive that are there. But there are ways. I mean, you saw it with Ted Cruz when he ran for U.S. Senate 12 years ago, that it was, he was running against lieutenant governor of Texas. And it was really through social media where he was able to break through. There wouldn't be a Senator Cruz right now if it wasn't for being able to play those alternative media types. So as we look at it, we got to figure out, how do we bring out our folks in the base, our Republican voters. We saw that 2 years ago where we just didn't have the turnout that they needed to. And so that's why we need to get them to vote early, need to go vote absentee, need to win on every election day possible instead of just on the last election day. And then two, in Michigan, unfortunately, Michigan's still probably Democrats have a 0.23 point advantage in the state. And so you got to win over some of the independent voters here in Michigan. And so that's why I think it's important to talk about issues that matter to working families, matter to job creators. And it's about a positive vision for Michigan. And I think that's why, earlier this year, Senate Republicans, we introduced a set of legislation that reformed education, provide more choices for parents, take more accountability in our schools. We introduced legislation that would increase penalties on fentanyl and methamphetamine and lower, and ban these sanctuary jurisdictions around the state to stop some of these Whitmer policies that we've seen of funding legal immigrant lawyers and housing for illegal immigrants, and let's not be an attraction point for this. And then we also introduced a set of legislation that actually involves the free market and private property rights, and folks, increase the number of people that live in the state. Because common sense, conservative ideas, lower taxes, less regulations, more predictable regulations. It's not rocket science. I mean, you got to remember Governor Whitmer last year, she had to do a whole committee on a population growth committee. Why are we losing population? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they announced it in December, and she's ignored it because it was a damning statement on her first 5 years in office that her policies have failed Michigan families, Michigan job creators, and have pushed more people. Not just the COVID shutdowns that we've seen that were complete failures, the toughest lockdowns in the nation, that not just her education policies that ended accountability and is working to end choice, but also you look at it, she's failed on infrastructure and roads, and she's failed on economic development and creating jobs here in the state. And so we have something to do about it this fall. There can be something, and that's really putting a check mark on Governor Whitmer, and that's winning back the state house. And that needs to be, I think, if you care about Michigan, the direction of Michigan, we got to work to make sure Donald Trump is the next president of the United States. Mike Rogers is in the U.S. Senate. I know you've been out there working hard on that. But the state house, there's about a dozen districts around the state that we need to be spending our time. We need to be writing. If you can write a $25, $50, $100 check to folks like Ron Robinson and Macomb, or Steve Frisbee in Calhoun County, or Kevin Whiteford and South Haven, or Patty Trumbley up north. I mean, there's about 8 Democrats that are in big trouble going in this fall. 4 of those seats Trump won in 2020. There's no reason why we can't take those seats back this year and stop Governor Whitmer's reign of failing Michigan families.
Yeah, and you hit on a lot right there. And I want to cover some of the things that you said, especially with, what she's been doing with the state. They don't talk about what they're doing. They talk about Orange Man bad, and they want to bring up reproductive rights. That's all they do. Okay. And they just kind of be quiet about everything else that's going on. I mean, Michigan's in trouble. This just came out that our reading scores are at a 10-year low for Michigan third graders. That just came out with the MSTEP. And I think didn't our nanny Governor Gretchen Whitmer, she repealed the read by grade 3 law?
Yeah. So you have, over the last year and a half, some of the standards that haven't really been fully implemented, that were implemented under Governor Snyder, and they were delayed. One, because there's a Democrat majority on the Michigan Department of Education that is a fully owned subsidy of the teachers union. And then 2 is that the COVID lockdowns that she implemented, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
A recent study earlier this year by Stanford and Princeton says that the average student in Michigan's a half a grade level behind than where they were at before COVID. But the accountability measures, they continue to repeal, saying that you can't have, with student growth, that can't have anything to do with teacher performance. Saying that, folks, there should be an expectations that you should be able to read at grade level. 60% of Michigan students cannot read at the grade level.
That's horrible. And the Democrats, their solution is to throw more money at it, right? So I want to share with a graph on the amount of money that we're spending in student achievement. Obviously, it's not the amount of money that we're spending to the kids. There's a huge difference right here. So what is the solution, Aric?
Well, I think that one is that the money's not actually going in the classroom.
Correct.
You don't see smaller class sizes. You don't see the accountability. What you're seeing is bulking up administration.
Yes.
The number of administrators that you have. I mean, I just look at my small school of Lawton, and I mean, I grew up on a small, dairy farm and went off to Hillsdale College, but I graduated from the same public school that my brothers and dad and grandfather graduated from. And it was only 68 in our class. And, but we didn't have, I don't think we had 80% of the administrators that there are now in the school.
It almost seems like the Democrats' playbook is more government, right? Let's put more administrators in there, more people. Because I've been highlighting school boards over the last 2 years. I'm helping school boards try to get back their local school boards, or the people in that area trying to get back their local school boards. But there are school systems out there with like several different assistant superintendents, and they're getting paid like $60,000 to $100,000 a year, and they're like, why do we need 3 or 4 of these folks when we should just have the superintendent, the assistant, and so forth? But like you said, they're throwing all this money in administration, just like big government, that's supposed to solve all of our problems.
Well, and we continue to fall behind. I mean, we're getting close. I mean, Mississippi's actually been improving as we've been failing.
And that didn't used to be that way. It was opposite.
Yes. And we're in the bottom 10 in education attainment now. I mean, that's a disaster in education system. And what we've seen from Governor Whitmer is instead of actually increasing accountability and making sure that students are learning at grade level and trying to set high expectations for the teachers, for the administrators, and from leadership, is what we've seen is that we're going to take away any accountability measures and we're going to limit choice to parents and families. And that's what we've continued to see in education. I think it's been a failure. And it just goes into, we're in the 6th year of Governor Whitmer. We're in the 2nd year of this Democrat majority. And their radical agenda has repeatedly failed our families and our job creators in the state. And people wonder why we're losing population in other states. And they wonder why we're not seeing the investments, that you're actually having to bribe companies with hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars to some of the most profitable companies in the world to be able to locate them here. When you look across the border in Indiana, that their subsidies are about 1/10 as much. I think they did a plant outside of South Bend. It was 1/10 of the offer of what Michigan had, and it went to Indiana instead of Michigan. Well, Indiana has a lower cost of government. They're a right to work state. They have lower income taxes. They have lower corporate income taxes. And they've done these common sense reforms to government where they defend the taxpayer, not the tax taker. And over the last 20 years, Indiana's grown by 800,000 people. And Michigan has shrunk under Granholm, grew under Snyder, and is shrinking once again under Whitmer.
It just goes back to, like, if you make the state a business-friendly state, jobs are going to be there, tax revenue is going to go up because people are going to move here instead of leave because we're losing our tax revenue, obviously. So, I mean, it's just everything that we kind of talked about before is with lowering energy prices, making sure that it's business-friendly and people will want to move here. It's common sense to us, but it literally just doesn't get done, and we knock our head against the wall. And these are the things that they just refuse to talk about. Another thing that, like, I haven't heard Slotkin or Whitmer or anybody else running right now, they're not even addressing men and women's sports. They're not addressing boys and girls locker rooms and restrooms. I've been talking about this on the road is, if you would have came back to me 15 years ago and told me that men are going to be competing in the Olympics, I would have laughed you out of the room. I was like, there's no way that's going to happen. Everything that we did with Title IX, all of this stuff, there's no way. Women have been fighting for these rights. And not only the Republicans wouldn't want it, but the Democrats wouldn't want it either because they're for women's rights, supposedly. And here we are. And it's insanity.
Well, I mean, somebody who's a traditional values guy, grew up on a family farm. Family's been farming for 6 generations here in Southwest Michigan, and there's a little common sense that comes to all this. Like, at the end of the day, you learn at a really early age. I mean, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and she's like, a boy's a boy, a girl's a girl.
Common, yeah, like, really. Like, why are we even having this conversation? You can't talk about this on TikTok because I got deplatformed for the third time on TikTok just a month ago because I was posting a school board meeting where a mom was standing up and saying, I don't want my daughters in the locker room changing in front of a boy. They took me down, labeled it as hate, and I had to restart my TikTok again, right? It's like the definition of insanity. So now the LGBTQ plus community is like the pandemic and lockdowns and the vaccine and the mask. You're not allowed to talk about it. And it's not that we're homophobe and transphobe. We just don't want this stuff force fed down our kids' throats. I mean, there is some common sense in some things that we can do in the middle to make sure that these kids who are obviously struggling with some things, that they get the help that they need, that they get the facilities that they need, but you just don't implant them. And hey, just like Governor Whitmer said back in 2009, the Constitution is to be used as a shield and not as a sword. You don't take the rights away from some that are going to affect the rights of most. That's not how it's supposed to be. That was coming out of her own mouth. But now we don't care about your daughter or the majority of these kids in schools.
Well, I think it goes back to just what, we're common sense conservatives. Like what does it actually mean to have a little common sense as we debate some of these issues and tackle them? And you're right, 10 years ago, you couldn't imagine that you're having some of these discussions on this. And so let's get back to the basics. Let's kids be kids for a little bit. Why are we, allowing all this indoctrination to happen in our schools? And then secondly, it's really parents with children. I mean, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and I'm concerned as you go, what's being taught, what's out there. And then the Democrats don't want to limit your freedom. And this is one of the biggest challenges that we have, is the Orwellian marketing that you've seen from the Democratic Party, saying they're the party of freedom when they believe in the state over the individual, right?
100%.
When they believe that they were the original book banners. You couldn't read Huckleberry Finn, you couldn't read Catcher in the Rye, you couldn't read any of these big classics talking lessons. We just don't want our kids to have an access to porn.
Exactly.
And then this whole sense is like, on this cancel culture and freedom of speech and our First Amendment rights. You just look at our college campuses and what's happening today with what the left-wing Democrats are doing. And I don't think there's any moderate Democrats left. Let's be honest. I mean,
no,
I think
you're right.
I think they're leaving with, you look at the U.S. Senate, and they're leaving with Joe Manchin and maybe Sinema. Maybe those are the last two moderate Democrats, because every other one of them actually wants to change the rules in the U.S. Senate, long-term rules in the U.S. Senate, so they can allow a permanent Democrat majority. And the media continues to buy into it by calling Alyssa Slockins a moderate. It's not a moderate when you blow up centuries of tradition and rules and an institution that are safeguarded our liberties and freedoms over the last few decades. And this is the challenge that they talk about a lot of these issues at the national level, and the filibuster it forces bipartisan compromise no matter who has the majority in the U.S. Senate. And the Democrats don't want to do it. They want to add 4 new Democrat U.S. senators, so there's a permanent majority there. They want to pack the Supreme Court to make sure that they have a permanent left-wing progressive majority in the Supreme Court, and they're going to jam down a bunch of socialist policies onto this nation. In this election, going into this fall, it's going to be so important, is that, are we going to defend our traditional values, our common sense conservative values, our First Amendment, Second Amendment rights? Remember, the U.S. Senate, changing the composition of the U.S. Senate will mean that you change the composition of the Supreme Court, which means a complete reinterpretation of our constitutional rules and our rule of law. And so do we respect the free market, personal responsibility, private property rights, not government mandates? Or are we going to have the government over the individual? And that is That is what this election's about this fall. And that is why I think as you look at it, the Rogers-Slotkin race, while you see these left-wingers from California, New York pouring tens of millions of dollars into this race against Mike Rogers, because they want to permanently transform our country away from our traditional values and our common sense rule of law history into a radical socialist utopia.
Yeah, and that's the Democrats, right? They always scream from the rooftops that they're the party of democracy. Their candidate has not had one primary vote, right? And they're propping her up, running her away from the media. She's finally doing a sit down with her service dog, Waltz, right? Tonight with CNN, which has been edited. It's not going to be live. So they're going to cut it up and they're going to put it out there. And the people who are awake and understand and know and believe, it's that middle. And I think that's why we have to talk about those kitchen table issues, not only about the economy, about the retirement, but also the cultural indoctrination that's happening in our public school systems and everything else that's being force-fed down these kids' throats, the reading levels, the list goes on. And the good thing is we have all this to talk about. So here's a question I want to ask you. What should President Trump not do over the next 2 months in his campaign?
Well, I think as you look at the next, was it about 70 days until the election?
Correct.
That I think as you look at what President Trump is going to be talking about, I think it's really what he should be talking about are the issues that matter. There's never been a time where you look at 4 years ago of having a president compared to the last 4 years ago of having the Biden-Harris administration. And I know the media doesn't want you to say that she's actually Biden's vice president and was Biden's border czar. You know, they've been trying to make every excuse like she's never even met Joe Biden, right?
Yeah.
The issues are on our side going into this fall's election. And my 2 cents is that if we're talking about the issues that matter to Michigan families, we win. Immigration on the border. Do you want a closed border or do you want an open border? We still allow 1 million legal immigrants a year. No other country allows that. We just don't want illegal aliens pouring over this border with fentanyl, methamphetamine, and drugs that are poisoning young people. The cost of living. Do you want a drill, baby, drill to lower the cost of energy and gas and actually be competitive in the 21st century? Or do you want to be dependent on other countries like Venezuela and Russia and Saudi Arabia for your energy? I mean, let's just add a little common sense to it, right? I mean, like, let's use American domestic energy sources. You want lower taxes, a smaller government, personal responsibility, free markets. There's a real comparison there. You want 4 years ago, there was peace deals happening in the Middle East.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And today there's full out war happening in the Middle East with a chance of World War III. I don't think Donald Trump is all that far off that's a real possibility with what's going on in the Middle East right now. And you look at Ukraine, it's under Obama and Biden where Russia continues to take over countries and land areas in Eastern Europe.
Yep.
They did not move at all under President Trump. And so for national security, for security of our border, security of our families, and our economic success as a nation, that we have to stop the Democrats' radical agenda. And that starts by electing President Trump this fall. And I think as long as we talk about the issues that matter, the economy, immigration, crime, education, this is the first time in our lives, Garrett, this is the first time in our lives where actually Republicans have an advantage on education because parents see what's going on in the schools. Parents see what happened when you don't have choice and the governor locks their students out of the schoolhouse.
I hit on that point. We have every single advantage. We really do. If you really look at the economic policy, if you look at the policies of everything that President Trump wants to do, we have everything on our side except for the brainwashing that happens with the corporate media and having the majority of the social media. I know Zuckerberg's saying that he's going to stay neutral and everything else and not be pressured from the government this time around. But still, they're so good at pushing out a lie. The media runs with the lie. And if you tell a lie long enough, people start to believe that it's true. I mean, the stuff that we're talking about right now, back in the late 90s, and I know we're aging us right now, but if you talk about these things that the Democrats are doing right now, they would not win an election. They wouldn't win a neighborhood book club election, let alone the president and the Senate and the gubernatorial races. Like, it wouldn't be even a possibility. I mean, people would be like, there's no way we're letting that radical in. But they've been so effective at brainwashing our society, at least half, hopefully under half, so we can win, that people just like, yeah, we want our nanny government to take care of us. You and I, and the most of us that are watching right now, we saw it during the pandemic. We saw it when the research and the data started coming out. Like, you know what? This is a glorified cold. Don't spit in each other's mouths. Wash your hands. We'll get through it just fine. And then all of us were suppressed. We were deplatformed. Again, I'm experiencing it right now with TikTok, talking about the LGBTQ plus community. They still have that power. And when you have that money to fuel that power, that's a problem, right? So President Trump, in my opinion, sticks with policy. I mean, just continues to hammer policy during the debate. I mean, he's got everything on his side. If he just stays calm, cool, collective, and presidential, I think we win this thing. And to go along with the border, I mean, they're saying they're trying to stop illegals. We're trying to stop illegal immigrants, build the gosh darn wall. That's Kamala says she wants to build the wall now after she just sold all the wall for scrap that was left over or was there for building supplies. And we want entrances along that wall to allow the people to come in here legally. And you know what? Not everybody gets to come. What are you going to bring to the table, right? How are you going to make our country great? And by the way, I don't see 10 million people trying to swim to Cuba, trying to go to China, trying to go to Russia or Venezuela or anywhere else. Obviously, this is still the best country in the history of our species. And so no matter how much the Democrats try to push that out and try to brainwash in society, feeling guilty for success, feeling guilty for your wealth that you've earned and everything else, but they're so effective at pushing out that lie.
Yeah, I mean, it really goes back to the policy issues over the next 70 days and drawing that deep contrast. I mean, we're taping right now, or I guess we're live on Thursday, and this afternoon, President Trump's going to be outside of Lansing and Potterville talking about inflation, the economy, American competitiveness. And what you've seen from this, Governor Whitmer and the Biden administration is they're jumping over backwards to get these Chinese Communist Party linked battery plants here in this country, while we're laying off thousands of American workers from American companies because of their dash towards mandating electric vehicles and banning the internal combustion vehicle. And I think Americans, especially Michiganders, I think are smart enough to know that water pump factory in rural Michigan that employs 150 people is out of work with an electric vehicle. Those employees that build spark plugs in Macomb are out of work with an electric vehicle. The folks built, transmission parts and everything. I mean, this just continues to hollow out our manufacturing core, and we're depending upon Chinese technology with linked companies to the Chinese Communist Party. And if you don't know that, they're not our friends.
Correct.
And we're spending billions of dollars of taxpayer money to subsidize them. Americans still don't want to buy them. And so they're having to do another tax credit to try to get folks to buy them. And at the end of the day, it's going to make us poorer, less competitive, and it's going to put more Americans on the welfare line. Let's concentrate on what's made America great. What has that been? Free markets, personal responsibilities, private property rights, not government mandates, the rule of law, right?
Yep.
Allowing entrepreneurs to invest and grow. And so that's why going into this fall's election, we need to be talking about reforming government for taxpayers, not tax takers, and making sure that the reforms that President Trump put in, that Biden has been working to undo, that we're ready to go ahead and compete and win in the 21st century via regulations and taxes and competitiveness.
Amen. So what's next for Aric? All right. Obviously, we got 2026 coming upon us. What's your plans? What's your next kind of move that you're going for?
Yeah. So this fall, over the next 70 days, I'm all in concentrating on the state house, making sure that we're working together to win back. We got to win back 2 seats in the state house to be able to have a majority and have Speaker Matt Hall as our next Speaker of the House. I think those are the 2 scariest words in Lansing Democrat circles is Speaker Hall, because Governor Whitmer has said to lobbyists around town, I do not want to work with that guy. Just a second.
Yep.
And so that's really where I've been helping fundraise, helping with our Senate Republicans, working together to make sure we're doing doors, make sure we're out there doing the grassroots and doing the turnout. We've built up that infrastructure that I think we need to make sure we get folks out early to vote, make sure that our voters are showing up at the polls. 2, helping Mike Rogers and Donald Trump winning Michigan this fall. And so I'm going to continue to work hard on those and try to, as we've seen over the last year and a half, is 1, block some of the most radical Democrat agenda, making sure that our caucus is held together, saying that the Democrats own the energy policy here in Michigan. They own increasing the costs and having it less reliable. Democrats own the economic effects of their devastating tax increases and stealing from the teacher pension fund, and that they have to take ownership of them over-regulating our businesses and increasing the income tax by $800 million at the beginning of this year, because Whitmer and the Democrats have failed. Let's stop them. And then we got to build. I've been working hard to build up the resources for the state Senate. And so we got to put a check mark on Governor Whitmer first, and then start building up the resources we need for the state Senate, recruiting folks that matter, and work to make sure that we're ready for 2026. But this year, we got to be laser focused on this year. And if you're not laser focused on this year, I think your priorities are misplaced.
You're exactly right, because we're basically fighting for this little fabric of this little idea called America, and that's what's at stake, and that's why we have to win, obviously, up and down the election, all across the board. And I like what you just said. Hey, the work has just started. I mean, after we get through this election cycle, we have to do the 24-hour rule. We're going to celebrate it. We're going to be high-fiving, yes, and we got to get right back to work. I mean, because we have to get the state back.
Well, in some of the races that aren't covered too, I mean, we just got our nominees for the Supreme Court, and you look at the decisions that a 4-3 Democrat majority is making on our Supreme Court, they're radical. They're radical. They're changing the way business is done in Michigan. They're giving away a bunch of these trial lawyers to sue businesses here in Michigan. They're making us less competitive, less safe, families less secure. They're failing our families. And so Andrew Fink is out of Hillsdale. He's a Hillsdale College grad. University of Michigan Law School didn't over-corrupt him. He's a Marine. He's ready to fight for Michigan families. So Fink's going to be on the ballot for an 8-year term. And then Judge O'Grady came out of the convention this last week. And though there's a 30% drop off when they get to judges from the top of the ballot on down. Republicans, they'll go in and vote straight ticket. Democrats sometimes go in, vote straight ticket. Other ones split their tickets. But turn the ballot over, go to the back, look at the judges. And I'm telling you, Kyra Bolden, who was appointed by Governor Whitmer, she'll have an incumbency designation under her. And it's for a 4-year term. But she is a Supreme Court justice. One of her clerks that she hired was actually tried to kill a cop years ago, shot at police officers. And this is who we have in the Supreme Court and who they're hiring as clerks. I mean, this is pretty insane. I'm somebody that backs the blue, somebody that defends the rule of law, common sense conservatism, looking at it. And this is how radical the person that Governor Whitmer appointed. And she never had one day in court on anything, any understanding. And it's just pushing the progressive agenda. And so I would be remiss if I didn't talk about that Supreme Court, a co-equal branch of government, and something where when the Supreme Court, remember in 2020, ended the lockdowns We had to sue as a legislature, file a lawsuit, against Governor Whitmer, filed that beginning of May. Unfortunately, we don't have a rocket docket for legislative lawsuits like they do in Wisconsin. They ended theirs quickly against Governor, Evers, but we ended up winning. Same with election laws against Jocelyn Benson. We won several of those election lawsuits against Jocelyn Benson that was not when she was not following the law under COVID. The legislature is the one that's supposed to approve election laws instead of her just making them up willy-nilly back in 2020. And we actually won against her several times.
What are you thinking of her, or bringing up her? What do you think about her threat of, hey, we're coming after you if you talk about the elections not being legit?
Well, this goes back to the thought process from the radical Democrat agenda that it's not about the individuals and their votes. It's about the nanny state knows best. And at the end of the day, all that we want is common sense conservative Michiganders. All that we want is that one legal vote is counted one time, and that it's accurately counted, and that you have to be a citizen and a resident of Michigan to be able to vote, and that you do it on paper ballots.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's that complicated. That you got to be a resident of Michigan, a citizen of the United States, and that we don't want anybody to cheat. It's counted once, and it's counted accurately, right?
Yep. Common sense again. Here we are. And that's what we get a lot on the road. And I'm sure you do too, is a lot of people are still upset. The election's going to be stolen. And that's dangerous talk, because what happens is people stay home because they think their vote doesn't matter. And that's kind of what happened in 2020. I think Luke Meerman said that there was 200,000 people that were going to vote for President Trump that didn't end up voting for Trump, whether they were at work or something happened. But there's 200,000 voters out there. And if we continue to put that out there, that the election's not going to count, then that's going to keep people home. And I keep telling these folks, like, look, there's fraud in every election. We know that. How much? Who knows? However, we have to win to make change. That's the only way. We have to win up and down the ticket so we can go in there and do these common sense solutions, right? Paper ballots, ID. I mean, it goes on and on. We have to win no matter what.
Well, and it's about, as I look at it, as like results-oriented leadership. And you only get the results from your leadership if you're actually in office making the difference and winning. Correct. And this is something where President Trump says we got to swamp the vote.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
And he's been active in saying that, you know what, if you're both working, you have young kids, one goes off to work at 6:30 in the morning, the other goes off to work at 8. They don't get back home till 6, 7 at night. I'm sorry. If we can get them to vote 2 weeks before the election, we need to get them to show up early and vote absentee, whether it's a Saturday before or 2 weeks before. And then we can check them off that, hey, and they want to see the difference. I mean, they're working hard. They saw the effects of COVID. They saw the effects of, they got laid off. Their kids couldn't go to school. These are real effects. Some of these progressive things, that whenever you order something, you just go on Amazon, you get it delivered to your home. They don't even think about that there's a farmer out there, that there's a factory worker, that there's a truck driver. It's out there, the whole logistics that are there. And so as we go into this year's election, we saw it 2 years ago in Michigan. And people look at the statewide races where there was a big turnout. I think there's about 600,000 more people that turned out because of the abortion issue and Prop 3. But you look at the legislature, we could have stopped the entire progressive legislative agenda over the last year and a half if it wasn't for 400 votes out of 135,000 cast in Macomb County, or 400 votes out of 40,000 cast downriver in Detroit. So each of just 2 districts would have tied the Senate, would have tied the House, meaning the entire progressive radical Whitmer agenda would have been stopped over the last year and a half.
And that goes with my narrative. Man, you give me the chills when you say that, because that's how powerful people are. And people always come up to me and they say, well, I really can't make a difference. Holy cow, you can. I mean, if you go back down to 2016, Trump won this state by 10,704 votes. That was it.
Yep.
So if you take 20 volunteers out of these 83 counties that we have, and they just sway 7 people, that's enough to win the election in 2016. So like you just said, having those conversations, just not leaving lit everywhere, pamphlets, nobody reads that. But when you're actually going and having conversations, you're talking to your neighbors, your friends, your families, and you're just talking policy, not telling them who to vote for, but just ask simple questions, right? Hey, is your life better than it was 5 years ago? What do you think about boys being in girls' locker rooms and restrooms, and women having to compete with men now in sports? And what about utilities and grocery prices? And how about all these illegal immigrants in here going crime throughout our country, raping and murdering our loved ones? Do you agree with that? And they're going to say all the right answers. And that's why you should vote for President Trump, because the Democrats are for all that hot garbage, and they're calling that hot garbage.
And I have to say, from the Trump campaign, the Trump Force 47, you and I were both out to the Kalamazoo open house kicking off Trump Force 47. And this is something where grassroots folks, you're not given, you're given 47 names, neighbors. And I did it a few Fridays ago, and they were within 2 miles of my home. I live out in the country, and 2 miles is pretty close by. You're not too far away, Gary. You're more in suburbia than
hey, I grew up on a dirt road, man. I'm from Onstead, so I know.
But it took an afternoon, and all that they were asking is that, are you going to be voting absentee? Are you going to vote early in person? Or are you going to vote on election day? What's your cell phone? How do we contact you? And how do we make sure we turn you out to vote? And this is what we're seeing, is that in this election, it's going to be a turnout election again. And how do we make sure that folks that want to see a change happen, want to actually see result-oriented leadership with common sense conservative ideas, that our freedom of speech is protected, our Second Amendment rights are protected, our free markets protected, the individuals ranked over the state, in making sure that these folks turn out. And we got to win starting 6 weeks out before the election, and win on every single election day, to make sure there's folks that are out there that have never voted before.
Correct. 100%. And also another organization is Charlie Kirk and Turning Point Action with Turning Point USA are doing a phenomenal job of getting out there and chasing those ballots and those people. And that's what it's going to take. All hands on deck across the board. You know what? I'm going to see you probably in a couple hours at Potterville, Michigan, right? Thank you so much for coming on the show today and just kind of getting into the depths and the ditches with us here and what's going on with Michigan, because I really feel that people need to hear this, especially from the people who are in that fight, who are actually trying to inspire change and get things done. So I really appreciate you coming on today.
Hey, Garrett, thanks for staying with it. Thanks for continuing to communicate with the Grassroots Army that's out there, and making an unfiltered, uncensored conversation, and saying, don't give up hope. Stay with it. The Democrats and the left-wing progressives want us just to walk away, wipe our hands. I mean, we all have businesses to run, families to raise, a lot of commitments out there. But it's up to each one of us individually to step up and to work to fight for our state and fight for our nation. Our families depend upon it. And so thank you so much. God bless you. Don't give up hope. Let's go ahead and win this fall.
Amen, brother. I'll see you in a few hours.
God bless.
Bye-bye. Wow. Okay. So he had a lot to unload and talk about, because there's so many things going on, but he hit on a few important things that Trump Force 47, and you can join that. And I put in the description where you can join that if you want to get involved. They're not asking you to do anything, but that's what we need. We need boots on the ground. We need this grassroots army that continues to grow, to get activated, stay motivated, stay inspired, because that's how we're going to do it. It's going to take an all hands on deck approach. And that is why this weekend, Saturday, we are going to be in the UP Yoopers. We're coming. The UP knows how much Garrett loves them. I'm always trying to get them representation. And so on the Grassroots Army tour that's coming up this weekend on Saturday, Kevin Rinke, Our Senate Republican candidate, Mike Rogers, local candidates will be there. We are heading up to Iron Mountain. Listen up. It's 11 a.m. Central Time. Iron Mountain. We will be there. We will be speaking for a couple hours. We will be there to answer questions. And then we're getting on the road and we're heading up to the Mine Shaft and Rock House in Houghton from 5 to 7 p.m. We are making this a day trip. So we are coming up actually Saturday morning. We are going to be speaking, and then we are going to get back on the road. And this is what I'm asking my Yoopers. I'm bringing people up to see you, to answer your questions. Show up. I know it's a Saturday. I know it's Labor Day weekend. Hey, show up. We're bringing up these people to answer your questions so you can have representation. I'm traveling 9 hours up there and then 9 hours home. It's going to be a long drive, but I'm always trying to make sure that my Yoopers get the representation that you all deserve. So make sure that if you're in Houghton, if you're in the Iron Mountain area, if you have to drive an hour and a half, I get it. I'm driving 9 hours up there one way, 9 hours back down. So I get the drive. But if you want representation, you got to show up. And so let's show up. Let's show up in numbers. And so we can have constructive conversation and we continue to rock and roll and build this grassroots army, because it's all of you who are going to be the difference maker in this thing. And that's why we need your continued support. At the grassrootsarmy.com merch store is indefinitely open. We have a great line of merch. We're going to continue to come out with merch every single month, some new and improved merch. But if you want to be a part of this thing, if you want to wear this merch and be proud and be full of pride, that's what I'm trying to build. You can go to the grassrootsarmy.com merch store and get yourself a t-shirt or a loved one or a Christmas present or any other birthday present you want to get. But you can go there and support us. We need your support. And the last thing I want to talk about is school boards. You guys have been following me. You know I have been highlighting some of the nasty school boards across this nation. And we have great people that are standing up now trying to win back their school boards. And so what I have done is I'm trying to help them raise money. So when I'm asking people for money, I'm always trying to give something to you guys. When you buy a shirt, you get a shirt. When you're going to donate to somebody's campaign, I'm going to give you an autographed copy of my book that I wrote 11 years ago. 11 years ago. A lot of people don't know that I'm a published author, but I wrote God's True Law, A Parent's Guide to Raising Successful Children. It's about 150 pages. It gives you success principles. It doesn't teach you how to parent. It basically checks the parent and says, quit screwing up your kids, and how you think, how you act, and everything that you say. So it's an awareness thing. It's a very easy read. When you read it, you're like, holy cow, it sounds like Garrett's speaking to me. That's kind of what it is. It is a great book. I'm very proud of this book. I was actually going to update this thing because I wrote this when I was a very early father. I have a lot more information up here now, but then COVID happened and then God had me down another path. I might update this thing eventually one day, but right now you can get an autographed copy. All you have to do, I put in the description, is you can Venmo me $20. All right, $20, and all net proceeds will go to some school board candidates that I'm trying to help. We have been slowly funneling money into their campaigns, which is good because they need it for signs, lit, and everything else. So $20, you get this autographed copy of the book. I will donate net proceeds to their campaigns. It's a win-win-win for everyone involved. That is for sure. So you can Venmo me at Garrett-Soldano. You can PayPal me at Garrett Soldano, one word. Or if you are wanting to send a check to me, just message me. I'll give you my address. Then you can send me a check, and I'll get that out into the mail for you today, all right? Or the next day or whenever you pay me. How about that? So we'll be on the road. I'm going to be seeing President Trump here in a couple hours, okay? He's being in Potterville, Michigan at All Rose Steel, and I will be there, and I will document what I can. So until next time, God bless you. God bless the state of Michigan. Of course, and always, God bless these United States. Yoopers! I'm coming, baby. All right, I'll see you this weekend, Saturday. I'm excited. I love my UP. See you soon.